Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2025 RBC Heritage Initial Research Show. Apologies for the stream starting and then stopping as my microphone wasn't wanting to work. It was dead, much like my Masters. Just a terrible, terrible week for yours truly. So I really hope you had a lot of success for the Masters. Played all of the Rory, played all of the Patrick Reed. Bryson had the Rory outright, all of that. So feel free to jump in the chat. Let me know how your Masters went and what did you think of this year's Masters. To me personally, I thought it was one of the most exciting Masters we've had in a long time. So would love to hear your thoughts on it as well. And then moving forward for the RBC Heritage this week, how much do you know of the course? All of that, we'll get into that. But let's finish this intro, shall we? All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytic tool out there for your money. Go check out FantasyNational.com because if you have that power in your hands, you're not going to have to listen to a moron like me give you all the suggestions that I did last week for the Masters. You're going to play the right plays. You're going to avoid all of the ones that I played. So go check out FantasyNational.com. Get the most powerful tool in your hands. For social media, my handle is in the description. I post research every Monday regarding the tournament of the week, some course information, patterns of previous winners. I'll try to have something for the RBC Heritage tomorrow. Might be a little bit difficult since it has turned into a signature event. I'll try to have something for you all. But normally, if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and top player usage in the DFS contests I play. That comes out every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. You would have seen all of the Sepp Straka that I played, all of the Keegan that I played, which ended up being a disaster. You would have seen the big betting card, which, to be fair to myself, I did have an outside chance at an outright at the start of Sunday for the Masters, and then Corey Connors decided to blow up. So I had a chance for maybe a couple holes, and then he disappeared. But if you want to see the players I'm using most often in my lineups, the wagers I've made for the week, give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a great article called The Fringe. I really cannot recommend it enough. And if you are a subscriber to his article, which is free to do, you're going to be able to get the deluxe version, which he sends out now on Wednesdays as well, regarding projected ownerships that we use and that I use for my rankings, all that. And you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday. So you really are missing out if you aren't a subscriber to his article. Make sure you're doing that and follow him over on social media. Go show them some support because that's where we also put our weekly write-ups. And then lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat's open. I want to hear from you all in addition to anything that you want to talk about the Masters. And then moving forward, remember, we do have a double tournament week this week. The main event, if you will, the signature event, the RBC Heritage at Harbor Town. But there's also the Corrales, which means there will be a full week of shows here at Calls. Sunday, Monday, Wednesday for the RBC Heritage, and then Tuesday for the Corrales. So make sure you set your reminders for that. But we're going to do our initial research for the RBC Heritage. So let's get into it. Let's do our initial research for the 2025 RBC Heritage. And we are going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over the GCSA tournament fact sheet. So honestly, I'm not sure if this was something that they just did for the Masters last week, but we are able to access the tournament fact sheet for Harbor Town and for the RBC Heritage and for Corrales. You'll notice that I don't have the cameras going. The microphone didn't want to play nice, and so I wasn't even going to mess with the cameras this evening. Good evening, Phil. Thanks for jumping to chat. Very much appreciated. Lit that Rory won. JT killed you. Top owned wouldn't have went him knowing his caddy was hurt. I didn't know that, actually. I didn't play much of Justin Thomas. I'm going to be honest. I found myself rooting for Justin Rose a little bit, but big congratulations to Rory on completing the career Grand Slam. To be honest, the poll question Wednesday will probably revolve around Rory, and let people kind of sink in that he has the career Grand Slam now. I played a little bit of Justin Rose, not enough clearly. Didn't play enough Rory. So my Masters was basically over by Friday, with the exception of the out or the long shot outright that I had. So I hope you had a decent amount of success. It sounds like JT hurt you quite a bit. Hopefully you accrued at least some of your money back, because I didn't accrue much of mine back. I almost donated every bit of my entry when my top 3 owned players, Sepp Straka, Keegan, I think technically Scotty was my 3rd most owned player, so him playing well, but everybody had Scotty. And then I just took a chance on Kevin Yu. I understood that going into last Wednesday night, but you had to take some chances for the Masters. Clearly I wasn't choosing correctly in the 6Ks. Hopefully you had some amount of success, Phil. We turn our attention to Harbor Town, a very, very famous Pete Dye design. So we'll have some, I lost like $200 and got $600 back. Hey, that's a winning week. Unless you're talking you were in for 800, got 600 back, which that always sucks, but at least you accrued some of it back. Because I did not accrue anywhere near, I accrued back a small decimal percentage of what I put in. I mean, it was just a really, really bad week for me. But as I was mentioning, with Harbor Town, this is a very famous Pete Dye design. So we're going to be able to use some Pete Dye filters this week. And let me tell you, Harbor Town plays like a true Pete Dye design. So you ended up losing 200. So you accrued back 75% of what you put in. We never want to have a losing week, but at least you were able to accrue 75% back, as opposed to what the kind of week I had. I'm not kidding. I didn't even accrue back 5% of what I put in. I mean, it was just a horrendous week for me. So at least you have that going for you. You're not as stupid as I am. So we're going to try to turn it around this week for both tournaments, and good opportunity as we have 2 tournaments to do it. There have been a few changes to Harbor Town from last year. There were some fairway bunkers that have been turned back into waste areas. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not so familiar with the course that I could tell you exactly what bunkers those are and how they affect play. Proud of my boy Homa. We did in your lineups. No, I did not. I did not have Homa. I was just not going to play a guy who had missed 5 or 6 straight cuts. And quite honestly, I don't know how many people would have. He had been in no form really going back to the Masters last year. And then comes into Augusta this year and top 12s and secures his spot in next year's Masters. So, good for Max Homa. I don't know what that does, moving forward. But we'll take a small look at Homa because he'll be there this week for the RBC Heritage. So I'm not familiar enough with the course to tell you which bunkers these are, how it affects play. But there have been some improvements on 1, 8, 13, and 13, 15, and 16T. So some upgrades, some renovations. The course has been lengthened a few yards. We'll get into that. Rough was listed at just 1.25 inches last year. It's listed at 1.5 inches this year, but this is not a very deep rough type of course. Think a lot like the Masters because it has this overseed, much like the Masters does. A tee was added to number 7 before the tournament 2 years ago. A palm tree was added inside the bunker ahead of the tournament 3 years ago. So there have been some small, minor improvements to Harbor Town throughout the years, but the overarching theme or the design of the course has never strayed from Pete Dye's original design and how he wanted the course to play. So this is a Pete Dye design. It has been lengthened over the years, so it is now a 7,213 yard traditional par 71, meaning 4 par 3s and 3 par 5s. It is quite interesting, though, and Gabe made this note in his article this week, that the course, if we skip ahead just a little bit, course has never played to its true scorecard yardage. You see, Fantasy National has always listed this less than 7,200 yards. So I still feel comfortable using short course metrics this week for Harbor Town. If they were to stretch the course to its absolute maximum, then it would stretch over 7,200 yards, but they've never done that in the past. So until they do it, we're gonna stick with that short course filter. The greens here are extremely small, rivaled only by Pebble Beach. These are only 3,700 square feet. So very, very tiny greens, and they are dome shaped. So they will play a whole lot smaller than even the square footage says. For the seemingly, I think it's the 6th straight week, we are on, or no, I should take that back. Obviously, we were on bent for the Masters, but before the Masters, for 5 weeks, we were on Poa Trivialis, and we're going back to Poa Trivialis this week at Harbor Town. The rest of the course is this rye overseed, very, very tiny greens, very tiny fairways. They are pinched, they are dog legs, they are tree lined. These are some of the most narrow fairways the players will see all year. Torrey Pines is very, very difficult because it's very long and with very narrow fairways. This is a different type of difficult, as these are narrow in the sense that there's a lot of tree trouble when players are playing here at Harbor Town. The first 16 holes at Harbor Town kind of meander or snake through a forest in South Carolina. We are in Hilton Head. And then the last two, 17, and then the signature hole at Harbor Town with the lighthouse in the background, plays along the coast of the ocean. But very, very, very narrow fairways, and they will play more narrow than what's even listed here, again, due to the dog legs, the tree-lined pinching of these fairways. Not a whole lot of bunkers, 51, so roughly 3 per hole. But being in Hilton Head, there is water in play on every single hole. So much like a Pete Dye design you would expect, he plays tricks with you, especially off the tee. He's very, very famous for, if you want to take on the danger off the tee, that's going to put you in the best position to approach the green. If you take the more conservative line or conservative play off the tee, a lot of times you're set up with a very difficult, if not completely blocked, approach to the green. So Pete Dye is very, notorious for playing tricks with players or on players, especially off the tee. So those are the key takeaways this week in terms of a course standpoint for Harbor Town. Pete Dye design, we'll be looking at that. We're still going to be looking at short course. It just stretches over that 7,200 yard barrier or boundary, if you will. Very short course. Par 71, so 4 par 3s, 3 par 5s. Very tiny Poa Trivialis greens, 18 holes with water in play. There's a look at the GCSA tournament fact sheet. We'll move to Fantasy National, the players in the field this week. And let me set a couple of these filters here. In fact, we'll just go ahead and start with Pete Dye. Now, again, we'll have more information tomorrow when the Aeon Next 10 and the Aeon Swing 5, all of that is finalized. I'm just being transparent. I don't know who those players are. Also, the winner of the Masters would have been exempt into the RBC Heritage. Rory was already exempt, so that didn't change. So I would imagine Justin Rose now gets an invite with his performance from the Masters. But I'm just being honest. I do not know who the Aeon Swing 10 and Next 10 and Swing 5 are. We'll have that more covered tomorrow. But for the players that have been loaded into Fantasy National, going back to 2023, your top performers on Pete Dye courses in the field this week: Scotty Scheffler, who is your defending champion here at the RBC Heritage; Xander, Brian Harmon, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, Wyndham Clark, Tom Hoagie, Alex Smalley, Colin Morikawa, Sung Jae, Minwoo Lee, and Denny McCarthy. Your top 12, thanks to ties. In the same vein, we're going to look at some short course metrics, or at least performance. So on courses that are short, less than 7,200 yards, your top performers in the field this week: Justin Thomas, Scotty, Sepp Straka, Michael Kim, Ben Griffin, Tom Kim, Patrick Cantlay, JT Poston, Austin Eckroat, and Tom Hoagie. Just going to check. I highly doubt the Masters is in here yet. It is not. I didn't think it would be. Figured I would check. With that, I think we'll go ahead and jump to the course breakdown here in Fantasy National. First thing I like to do is to try and get a feel for how difficult the course is. So we look for the 9th and 10th most difficult holes. If that's where par falls, that would generally indicate an average difficulty. Here, it is still above par. So we go to 11, still over par. 12 is slightly over par. 13 is slightly under. So in between the 12th and the 13th hole is where par falls. That would signify that it's on the more difficult end of average. You do have a few scoring opportunities around Harbor Town, but not very many. Are we fading Thomas? It's so hard to... For me, it's so hard to say this early in the week until we see ownerships, and we don't even know his price yet for the tournament. It's just so... I don't want to commit to saying yes or no. I know he looked horrible today, but I mean, so did a lot of people on Sunday of the Masters. So I don't... He's been really good with the irons this year, so that really wants me to try to like him. It's just hard to say this early, Phil. It just is. I'm sorry that I can't give you a straight answer, but that's just the honest answer. Is that I definitely don't feel comfortable saying something to that effect without pricing. And then, if Justin Thomas were to come in at 6% versus, if he comes in at 20%, obviously those are the two extremes. But, at the 20%, yeah, I would easily fade him. At 6%, man, it'd be very hard not to play him. So until we get more information, that's where I'm at. Good evening, Josh. Thanks for jumping into chat. Very much appreciated. I think I only cashed one lineup. My lineups were awful. Well, you get to join me in that regard. I'm sorry that you did not have much success. My Masters felt like it was over on really Thursday night, Friday morning. I did have an outright that was on the periphery of contention today. His first 4 or 5 holes really eliminated that. So, it was a really, really, really bad week for me. Really bad week. So we're going to try and, do better this week. And it's a good opportunity because it's a double tournament week, Josh. We have the RBC Heritage and we have the Corrales. And there's a lot of value to be gained at the Corrales in these alternate field events if you're willing to put up, do some research, considering all the attention, rightfully so, is at Harbor Town. Yes, we're going to try to get it back this week. So coming back to looking at the scorecard here, like I mentioned, you do have a couple of good opportunities, particularly the par 5s around Harbor Town. The par 5 second plays to a half a shot under par. The par 5 fifth generally plays very easy, not quite a half a shot, but close to it. About 5 lineups. I wouldn't say it was one golfer, but all my cheap guys were awful. Yeah, that's where I was at. None of my guys really played well except for Scotty. I did have a little bit of Rose, obviously not nearly enough, but Sepp Straka, Keegan Bradley, Kevin Yu, those were 3 of my 4 cores, and they all missed the cut. So it was going to be a bad week. I did have some Rory, some Rose, not nearly enough. The other par 5 here at Harbor Town is a true 3-shotter. It is, if memory serves, I believe it is a double dog leg. So a layup off the tee and a layup on the approach. You see the eagle rate only 0.5%, so very, very difficult par 5. Decent enough scoring opportunity. But you also have some big numbers that can creep up because every single hole has water in play here. Most difficult par 3, 14th, placed about a quarter of a shot over par, 1500ths, a 10th, 2/10, 1500ths. So birdies aren't easy to come by here at the RBC Heritage. And I had too many Denny and JT. Yeah, I wasn't too high on Denny. I don't know why. It was just kind of a gut feeling. And if he made the cut, it wasn't spectacular. So, what was really telling this week is that there were only 7% 6-6 lineups. I think a lot of the lineups that were entered have found one guy that kind of blew up some lineups. Spawn might bounce back this week. Spawn was horrible every day. Yeah, Keegan killed me. I used a little bit of Spawn, not much, a little bit, but trying to get through talking about the scorecard here at Harbor Town. The par 3s are really difficult here. You got the shortest is at 192, and yet it is the hardest hole on the course. Par 3, 14th of 192. You have 198, very difficult par 3, 17th. 217 and 200. So long, difficult par 3s here at Harbor Town. 2 of the par 5s are gettable with an eagle rate at 2.5% and 2%. And then, you try to sneak in a few birdies here. You do have sneak a few birdies on the par 4s. You do have a drivable par 4 9th, 332. It does get shortened and play, into drivable range throughout the week. I'll be playing him, Max Homa, golfer of the week. Thought he was dead. I was with you. Phil, to Phil's credit, did mention or ask about Max Homa last Wednesday night, and I wrote him off, as I think most people did. And then he comes out in T12s. So I know my camera's off. I was having some technical issues to start the show, but I'm basically giving you the shrug shoulder look. I don't know. Guy finishes, 3rd or 5th or whatever it was at last year's Masters, sucks for an entire year, then comes here in top 15s. I don't know. For everybody who played Homa, congrats, because you saw something that I definitely didn't. He was less than 1% owned, yeah. I can believe it. I definitely can believe it. As we move down and take a look at Harbor Town from a graphical standpoint, looking at the strokes gained by shot type, this is a Pete Dye design, so no surprise. You're going to see a lot of approach. Yeah, some putters or putting is going to do well for the top tens. Look how around the green outweighs the off the tee. Off the tee is just simply mitigated here with the dog legs and the positional style layout that Harbor Town is. Off the tee is quite mitigated. As we move up the leaderboard for the top fives, approach overtakes the putting, which as you would think for a Pete Dye design. And then for your winners, about equal in terms of off the tee and around the green, but it really comes down to how well you are hitting your irons. This is a Pete Dye design after all. And I'm going to emphasize that. I'm going to sound like a broken record by the end of the week. This is a Pete Dye design. You have to think about iron play. Strong iron play, both from the fairway and from the rough this week. And around the green is going to have some added significance because of how small these greens are. Just want to experience a golf sweat one time. Seems hella fun. I've had several. I've been fortunate that I've had several. All of them in terms of outright. I haven't had a very good sweat in DFS. I take it back. I had one lineup that finished third like 3 years ago at an alternate field event, so it wasn't for a lot of money. But I've had one decent sweat in that regard. But in terms of like Millie Maker or the big contests, I've not had a good DFS sweat in that regard. So I'm right there with you, Josh. I'd like to experience one in DFS. Outright sweats are pretty fun, although I'm sure they've already taken years off my life and I'm already bald. So, I can't pull any hair out. Looking at strokes gained by hole by par, of course, our professionals are going to take advantage of par fives. Interesting to see the par threes are the least here. That's a little surprising to me. We move to the top fives, much the same, although the par threes do try to catch up to the par fours. And then for your winners, all in the par fives, they're probably getting an eagle or two on the gettable par fives, and then just kind of holding on for dear life on the par threes. We'll really dig into this tomorrow in the Data Dive show. I was in the top five in the Sony this year, winning 10,000, and Matsuyama went off and you lost. Yeah, that's also part of it. You could have 6 guys that are contending. You have to literally craft the perfect lineup, and that's the beauty of it, and that's the frustrating part of what we do, because we're all masochists, and we're trying to do that. All right, moving to hole composition. As I was mentioning, this is a little bit misleading considering the par threes that are in the 175 to 200 both measure above 190, 192, and 198, so they are on the extreme upper end of this boundary. But technically, 2 par threes from 175 to 2 par threes from 200 to 225. We do have the drivable par 4 ninth at 332, and that will get shortened throughout the week. We also have another short par 4. I believe that's on the back 9. 373. Not really drivable, but short. But the majority of the holes here at Harbor Town are these par 4s from 400 to 500 yards. You notice that we don't have any par 4s over 500 yards. They're all between 4 and 500 yards. 5 under 450, 4 over 450. But having said that, if we jump ahead just a little bit, you see just how many mid to maybe even long irons get played around Harbor Town. Again, it's the positional nature of the course, the dog legs, the Pete Dye messing with players' eye lines and angles. Guys have to be on the right side of the hole to attack greens. So sometimes it is better to be in the right fairway than in the right rough than the left fairway, and vice versa for whatever hole. And guys, that's why off the tee is kind of mitigated here, because players are kind of playing to the same spots. Unless, Rory or Bryson, I know Bryson in here, but just trying to give the best examples, whether they're just trying to, cut dog legs or whatnot. And then the final part of this whole composition chart, all three par 5s measure 550 to 600. Again, looking at the approach shot distribution, you do get a few shorter clubs like wedges here, but especially compared to the PGA Tour average, a full 25% from 175 to 200 versus 17.5 at the average tour event. I mean, even the 150 to 175, a good 2 to 2.5% more. So it'll be interesting tomorrow when we go into the data dive if these ranges really do contribute to high leaderboard success. It'll be interesting to look at that. Historic cut line, a little bit different, and this is a no-cut event, so we don't have to worry about that this week. But this gives a general idea of how difficult it is. It has gotten easier over the years. You see in 2020 is a bit of an outlier. This was played in June thanks to 2020 being a ridiculous year. But, it still got to be -1 a couple of times, +1, because in the early 2000 teens and 2000 aughts, I mean, you had +6, +5. It was more in that +2 to +3 range. So it has gotten easier over the years as technology and stats have really come into the game of golf. Gotten easier, but it's still not easy per se. Also explained here, you don't have a whole lot of birdies. You got a few. Even less bogeys, but there are some doubles around here, thanks, again, with all the water in play. So generally, you do have more scores that are under par than over par because the winning scores, particularly in the past few years, like Scotty wins at 19 last year, but really it was the mid-teens. He kind of pulled away from the group on Sunday last year. So, to be fair, it's probably more like mid-teens last year. Looking at 2023, again, 17 in a playoff, but mid-teens mostly. So there are birdies around here. There are decent scores around here. But it's not a birdie fest. Like, I don't think a winner has gotten to 20 under. It's been 19 a couple times. I don't really like counting 2020 because it was such an odd year. It was I think it was the first or second event back from the break, and then it played a lot differently because it was played in June. So I don't like looking at 2020. So we're looking at mostly a high upper teens, 16, 17, 18 winner style of course, which is average on the easier end of average. Driving accuracy, quite a bit higher here, and you'll notice that the distance is a lot lower here. I think this is the second least in terms of distance, and a lot of that is just due to the positional nature that Pete Dye forces. Players are clubbing down and taking very conservative lines because they're kind of forced to, so that way they actually have a shot into the green. Green and regulation percentage, extremely less. Much smaller here than the average tour event. Combination of very difficult greens, very small greens. Greens are protected by bunkers and water. Hitting the green here is not easy. Scrambling around here is. So it's not difficult around the green and chipping and pitching. Scrambling in itself is not difficult. 3 putts, not a whole lot here because these greens are extremely tiny. I think they are the second smallest to Pebble Beach, and they're really close to Pebble Beach's size. So hitting greens aren't easy, but it's not a huge punishment if you don't. 3 putts not a big deal. We talked about the distance, and because of the tiny greens, if you do hit the green in regulation, you're much closer to the hole than the average tour event. Here's a look at Harbor Town from a scorecard and a graphical view. Before we go back to the players in the field this week, let's take a quick look at the historic conditions. Last year, the first year, it was a signature event. You'll notice that it played really, really easy. And then the last round was average, but played pretty easy, especially the first 3 days. Now, 2023 and back, you're looking at mostly average. You know, if the wind really picks up, like it did in the second round of 2022, it can get difficult. If the winds really die down, it's going to get pretty easy. But you're generally looking at an average style difficulty course. Now, with that said, since this is a no-cut event, and generally speaking, the best players on the PGA Tour, I would not be surprised to see it lean more easy this week. Much like what it did for Scotty last year at a minus 19 winner, 16, 17, 18 around there. Several players in the mid-teens. I would expect it to be a little bit more easy due to the strength of the field. So, having said that, again, this is going to be a hunch, and we'll know a lot more when we start looking at the weather starting tomorrow. But I'm going to lean towards easy. So, your top performers in rounds that have been easy relative to par, going back to the beginning of last year, those players are Scotty, JT, Ludwig Aubert, Sepp Straka, Sungjae, JT Poston, Ryo Hitsatsune, Xander, Tom Kim, and Patrick Cantlay. We will start looking at a few things. I'm going to skip off the tee for tonight, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm thinking we're going to go with off the tee probably on Pete Dye designs, would be my guess. But let's stick to what we know we're going to be looking at and focused on. So we're going to start with approach. Your top approach players, and again, the Masters is not in here. So look at that. It wasn't in here at the beginning of the show. Now it is. Another reason why I really like Fantasy National. They're on top of it. But it won't have changed because the stats are proprietary, as you can see here. So anyway, your top approach players in 2025 here at Harbor Town this week: JJ Spawn, Colin Morikawa, Sepp Straka, Justin Thomas, Shane Lowry, Scotty, Sammy Valimaki, Tom Hoagie, Xander, and Tommy Fleetwood. I'm not going to ignore the around the green because these greens are so small. They're not hit with regularity. Players are going to have to rely on their around the green, much like they did at the Masters. Masters, just because it's difficult, not necessarily the case here. It's just that these greens are so small, just by nature of the course, they're going to have to use their around the green. So, top around the green players, 2025, Michael Kim, Minwoo Lee, Sung Jae, Andrew Novak, Alex Smalley, Seabass, Patrick Rogers, Russell Henley, Mackenzie Hughes, Daniel Berger, and Brian Campbell. Interesting. Is Hideki not playing? I guess he is not. He must have withdrawn. That's news to me, because Hideki should have been the number one around the green player. Then lastly, we'll take a quick look at some Poa Trivialis putting. Let me grab all of the courses here. We're going to start with Harbor Town, Innisbrook, Memorial Park. We have Quail Hollow. That's 4. Stadium course is 5. And then TBC San Antonio, Sawgrass, Scottsdale. These are the courses that are listed per the GCSAA as having Poa Trivialis overseed. On Poa Trivialis, your top putters that are in the field this week: Denny McCarthy, Thomas Dietrich, Jason Day, Sam Burns, Nico Echeverria, Wyndham Clark, Seabass, Matt McNeely, Billy Horschel, Harmon Hughes, and Adam Scott. Only other thing we can probably take a look at this evening, interesting. Let's take a look at proximity, since we saw this in the course breakdown here on Fantasy National. How many approach shots come from 150 to 200? So your top, I'm going to sort on total procs for 2025. But again, emphasizing we are looking at these two ranges here from 150 to 200. Of course, Scotty, Will Zalatoris, 5th and 14th. Sepp Straka, 3rd and 9th. Sami Valimaki, top 25 in both. Kind of interesting. Everybody else, okay, Tom Hoagie, 12th and 17th. Joe Highsmith, 1st and 20th. Corey Connors, 10th and 5th. So there's a few of the guys to maybe keep an eye on early this week. Maybe see their pricing, as these have been the best players so far in 2025 at the two specific ranges that Harbor Town demands. Lastly, for this evening, we'll take a look at tournament history. It is not an apples to apples comparison because, again, last year was the first year it was a signature event. So, 2023 and back was a full field event. But it at least gives us an idea who historically has played Harbor Town well. Your strokes gained total leader is Patrick Cantlay. Excuse me. 3 straight podium finishes. 3 straight top threes. Did miss the cut in 2021. Matt Fitzpatrick won 2 years ago, beating Jordan Spieth in a playoff. Also has another top 5. Brian Harmon, 5 for his last 5. Justin Thomas, 4 for his last 4. Of course, Scotty is our defending champion. He wins the signature event last year, but he also top 15 the year prior to that. Jordan Spieth wins 3 years ago. Colin Morikawa's had quite a bit of success here with 2 top 10s. Cam Davis has had 2 top 10s here. Russell Henley, quite boom or bust. 2 missed cuts, but has a top 10, a top 15, and a top 20. Christian Bezuidenhout, solid. No extreme, high-end finishes, but has never finished outside the top 35. Patrick Rogers, very good in his past 2 tries. Matt McNeely has some success here. A little surprising to see Sahith Theegala, knowing how wayward he gets. Having said that, this is forcing driver out of his hand. He's having to hit more irons and fairway metals off the tee, and you see the success he's had here. Something to keep in mind. Justin Rose has been okay here. Xander's been okay here. So there's a look at some of the players who have been pretty solid. Wyndham Clark, only because he caught my eye here, 5 for 5 with a top 5 last year. The players who have not been good around Harbor Town, been on, missed 2 cuts when it was a full field event, and then probably close to last year. Mackenzie Hughes, not a whole lot of success here. Nick Dunlap, and how he shot 90, literally, first round at the Masters. Did not have a lot of success here last year. Jaeger, 1 for 3. Nick Taylor has had abysmal performances here. Homa, not been very good here. You were talking about JJ Spawn. He's 0 for 3 here. Tom Hoagie, 2 top 25s and 3 missed cuts. Keegan, not necessarily all that great. Alex Smalley, 0 for 2. Adam Hadwin has had very minimal success. Same with Harris English. So there's a look at the players who have not been good around Harbor Town the past 5 years. But that's all I have for you all in terms of an initial research show. Stick around for a couple minutes. If anyone has any specific questions or wants to take a look at a specific stat or a player, wasn't able to build an early look file this week for Harbor Town, since I don't know the final field or finalized field. They own, next 10 and swing 5 and whatnot. That should be finalized tomorrow and loaded into Fantasy National. It'll be interesting to see, looking at the data dive tomorrow, these particular things, how much do these par 4s weigh? How much do these 2 ranges of proximity really matter? I'll be interested to see, strokes gained. for the top of the leaderboard, how much around the green, how much off the tee. We'll obviously be looking at approach and putting, so be interested to see. Well, that's what I have for this evening. Thanks to Phil and Josh for jumping in the chat. Very much appreciated. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel, liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. Taking a very in-depth look at golf statistics, giving you a statistician's view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. I hope you didn't pay a damn attention to anything I said for the Masters, because the Masters was horrible for me. I'm going to try and get back on the right track for the double tournament week this week. Harbor Town, RBC Heritage, and the Corrales, which reminds me, last little bit of information, is a full week of shows this week at Calls. Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday will be the initial research, the data dive, and the DFS tactics for the RBC Heritage. Tuesday night, we're going to have the full show, research, data, and DFS for the Corrales, the alternate field event down in the Dominican Republic. So make sure you set your reminders for that as well. But thanks again for all the support, for all of the wagers you made this past week for the Masters, for all the DFS contests you played this past week for the Masters, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.